Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back about 600 years to experience something our ancestors knew intimately, sleeping by the fire in a medieval hut. You're going to feel the warmth on your face, the smoke in your eyes, the particular exhaustion that comes from a day of manual labor under a pale winter sky. This isn't a castle. No tapestries, no four-poster beds, no servants bringing warm wine before sleep. You're a peasant in rural England, sometime around 1450, and your home is a single-room hut that you share with your family, your livestock, and approximately 10,000 insects you'd rather not think about. But here's the thing, it's your space, your fire, your straw, your slice of medieval existence. And tonight, you're going to sleep better than you have in weeks because you've been awake since before dawn and your body knows only one thing: rest. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Drop a comment. It's always fascinating to see this community spread across time zones, all of us settling in for sleep at different hours. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push open the rough wooden door. Smoke billows out to meet you, that familiar gray cloud that means home. Your eyes water immediately. They always do, but you've learned not to rub them with dirty hands. That just makes it worse, and you learned that lesson the hard way when you were 7. The fire crackles in the center of the room. It's the first thing you see, the first thing you always see, because everything else arranges itself around that orange glow. The hearth isn't fancy. Just a ring of stones on the packed earth floor, with a small pile of wood stacked nearby. Above it, a hole in the roof. You wouldn't really call it chimney. Let some of the smoke escape. Some. Not all. Never all. You can taste it in the back of your throat, that wood smoke flavor that never entirely leaves your clothes, your hair, your skin. Historians still argue whether medieval people suffered more from respiratory diseases because of this constant smoke exposure, or whether their systems simply adapted over time. You don't think about it in those terms, of course. This is just how air smells indoors. The hut measures roughly 15 feet by 20 feet. One room. That's it. Your entire domestic universe contained in a space smaller than a modern studio apartment, but without the bathroom, the kitchenette, or any sense of privacy whatsoever. The walls are wattle and daub. Thin wooden stakes woven together like a basket, then plastered over with a mixture of mud, straw, and animal dung. Yes, dung. It helps bind everything together, and when it dries, it's surprisingly sturdy. Does it smell? A little, especially when it rains. But you've got bigger problems than aesthetic concerns. The roof above you is thatched with rye straw, bundled and layered so skillfully that rain mostly runs off instead of dripping through. Mostly. There's a wet spot in the northeast corner that always seems to leak, and you've learned to avoid putting anything important there. Your father replaced that section last year, but apparently not quite well enough. The floor beneath your feet is just packed earth. Swept clean, relatively speaking, though clean means something different in 1450 than it does in the 21st century. There's fresh straw scattered around, especially near the sleeping area, which helps with insulation and absorbs, well, various things you'd rather have absorbed than puddling. Your family is already inside. Your wife is stirring something in the iron pot that hangs over the fire. Your 2 children, a boy of 8 and a girl of 5, are huddled on a bench near the wall, their faces illuminated by the firelight, looking tired and dirty and absolutely beautiful. Your father-in-law sits on the only chair because he's the eldest, and that's his right. The goats are in their pen at the far end of the room, separated from the human area by a low wattle fence. You can hear them shifting, chewing, doing whatever it is goats do when they're settling in for the evening. Their body heat helps warm the hut, which is why you keep them inside during winter months. Smart, when you think about it. Free heating, courtesy of livestock. You close the door behind you, shutting out the February cold, and move toward the fire, toward warmth, toward home. The hut you're standing in represents about 3,000 years of architectural evolution. Not that you'd phrase it that way. You just call it home the same way your father did, and his father before him, going back through generations of people who figured out how to not freeze to death in the English countryside. But here's what's fascinating. This structure, humble as it is, contains solutions to problems that stumped earlier humans for centuries. The wattle and daub walls, for instance. Someone, sometime around the Neolithic period, realized that mud alone wouldn't hold its shape. It would crack in the sun, dissolve in the rain, and generally refuse to cooperate with anyone's housing ambitions. But weave some sticks together first, create a lattice framework, and suddenly that mud has something to cling to. It's brilliant, really, like rebar and concrete, except invented about 5,000 years earlier. You run your hand along the interior wall as you pass. The surface is rough, uneven, almost organic in its texture. There are small cracks here and there, nothing structural, just the normal aging process of a wall that's been standing for about 15 years now. That's roughly how long a well-built peasant hut lasts before it needs major repairs or replacement. Your grandfather built this one in 1435, shortly after the previous structure finally gave up and collapsed during a particularly wet spring. He worked on it for 3 months, with help from neighbors who would expect the same assistance when their turn came. That's how things work in the village. You help raise someone's walls, they help thatch your roof. You loan them your ox for plowing, they loan you their cart for hauling. Nobody keeps precise accounts. You just remember who showed up when you needed them. The roof is where things get really interesting. Thatching is an art form, though you wouldn't necessarily call it that. Your neighbor John is the best thatcher in the village, and watching him work is like watching a master craftsman. He takes bundles of rye straw, each one about as thick as your forearm, and layers them in overlapping rows, starting from the bottom and working his way up. The angle matters enormously. Too shallow, and rain will seep through. Too steep, and the thatch won't stay in place during high winds. John's roofs are pitched at about 45 degrees, which historians have confirmed is nearly optimal for this climate and material. Not that John learned that from historians. He learned it from his father, who learned it from his father, who learned it from someone who probably figured it out through trial and error and a lot of wet, miserable nights. The straw itself is remarkable stuff. Each hollow stem acts like a tiny tube, channeling water downward and outward. When properly installed, a thatched roof can last 30 to 50 years, longer than the walls, ironically. The trick is keeping it dry enough that it doesn't rot, but also preventing it from becoming so dry that it becomes a fire hazard. You're always aware of that possibility. Fire, the thing that keeps you warm, cooks your food, and provides light after sunset, is also the thing that could destroy everything you own in about 15 minutes. You've seen it happen to the Miller's family 3 years ago. One spark landed in the wrong place, caught in the thatch, and by the time anyone realized what was happening, the entire roof was ablaze. They rebuilt, of course. Everyone helped. But they lost things that couldn't be replaced. A carved wooden chest that had belonged to the Miller's grandmother, some old cloth his wife had spent months weaving, and worst of all, their eldest son's winter cloak. He'd been wearing it when he tried to grab something from inside, and he didn't make it back out. You push that thought away. Your fire is well-maintained, carefully managed. The hearthstones contain it. The smoke hole channels most of the sparks upward and out. You're careful about where you stack firewood, keeping it far enough from the flames that there's no danger of accidental ignition. Most of the time, it's fine. The doorway you just entered through is low, about 5.5 feet tall. You have to duck slightly, even though you're not particularly tall by medieval standards, about 5'7", which is average for a peasant man of your time. The door itself is made from rough oak planks, held together with iron nails that your village blacksmith forged. Iron nails are expensive. You don't waste them on things like decorative carpentry or elaborate joinery. Every nail in this hut serves a structural purpose, holding door planks together, securing the hinges, fastening the support beams that hold up the roof. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were as poor as the historical record suggests, or whether they simply invested their resources differently than wealthy people did. You can't afford glass windows or stone walls, but you do own 3 iron pots, a decent axe, 2 sickles, and enough wool clothing to keep your family warm through winter. That's not nothing. The single window in your hut, really just an opening in the wall, maybe 2 feet square, can be closed with a wooden shutter from the inside. Right now it's open, letting in the last gray light of evening. Soon you'll close it against the cold, and your only illumination will come from the fire. No candles tonight. You're saving those for special occasions or for tasks that absolutely require directed light. Tallow candles are made from sheep fat, and while you have sheep, you don't have so many that you can afford to burn their fat for casual evening illumination. The fire is enough. It's always been enough. You move closer to it now, extending your hands toward the warmth, feeling the heat soak into your cold fingers. You've been outside most of the day, working in the Lord's fields, your required labor service, and your hands are stiff from handling cold tools and cold soil. The fire begins to thaw them. Slowly, painfully, almost as circulation returns. But it's a good pain, the kind that means you're warming up, coming back to life after a hard day. This hut isn't much by modern standards, but it's keeping you alive, and that's the only standard that matters in 1450. Fire is older than agriculture, older than pottery, older than the wheel, older than anything else humans have invented except maybe language itself. Your distant ancestors were tending fires in caves 400,000 years ago, and here you are in 1450, still doing essentially the same thing. Keeping flames alive, feeding them, protecting them from wind and rain. Some things don't change. The fire in your hearth is probably 3 days old now. You don't let it go out if you can help it, because starting a new fire from scratch is tedious work involving a fire steel, a piece of flint, and a lot of patient striking until you get a spark to catch and a bit of dried fungus or charred cloth. Much easier to just keep it going. Every night before sleep, you bank the coals, covering them with ash to slow the burn, ensuring they'll still be glowing come morning. Then you can simply add kindling, blow gently until flames appear, and you're back in business without wasting time or materials on fire starting. Your wife is better at this than you are. She has a gift for knowing exactly how much ash to use, which pieces of wood will catch quickly, how to arrange everything for optimal airflow. You've watched her bring seemingly dead coals back to roaring life in less than 5 minutes. It's one of those skills that separates competent householders from struggling ones. The wood you burn matters more than you'd think. Right now you're burning mostly oak, dense hardwood that burns hot and slow, producing excellent coals that radiate heat for hours. In the morning you might add some ash or beech, which are also good. You avoid pine and other softwoods when possible because they burn too fast, pop and spark dangerously, and leave behind a resinous creosote that builds up in your thatch. That's how fires start accidentally. Creosote accumulation plus one stray spark equals disaster. You learn about wood from your father, who learned from his father, the same way you learned which mushrooms are safe to eat and which fields flood in spring. This knowledge isn't written down anywhere. It lives in people's heads and hands, passed from generation to generation through demonstration and practice. Historians call this traditional ecological knowledge, which sounds fancy but basically means knowing stuff about your environment because your survival depends on it. The flames dance and shift in the evening draft. Orange, yellow, the occasional flash of blue at the base where the heat is most intense. You find yourself staring into them, the way humans have always stared into fires, seeing shapes and faces in the random movement of combustion. There's something hypnotic about it, something that quiets the mind. Your daughter is already drowsy, leaning against your wife's shoulder, her eyes half closed as she watches the flames. The fire is doing what fires have always done, gathering the family, providing a focal point, creating a shared space of warmth and light against the darkness outside. The smoke bothers you less now than it did when you first came inside. Your eyes have adjusted, and you've positioned yourself where the draft carries most of it upward and away. You've learned the good spots in the hut, where to sit or stand to minimize smoke exposure while maximizing warmth. It's a complex calculation involving air currents, heat radiation, and the constantly shifting conditions created by wind outside. The hearth itself is your most valuable household feature. Those stones weren't easy to gather. You collected them over several weeks from the stream about half a mile away, choosing pieces that wouldn't crack or explode when heated. Yes, some stones explode when subjected to fire. You learned that the hard way during your first year of marriage when a chunk of limestone shattered and sent fragments across the hut. Nobody was hurt, fortunately, but you were more careful after that about stone selection. The ring of stones serves multiple purposes. It contains the fire, obviously, preventing it from spreading across the floor. But it also absorbs and radiates heat, turning each stone into a small thermal battery that continues warming the space even when the flames die down. Smart design, really. Accidental physics, discovered through trial and error. Above the fire, suspended from an iron hook attached to a wooden beam, hangs your cooking pot. It's one of your most valuable possessions. A decent-sized iron cauldron that can hold enough pottage to feed your family for 2 days. Iron pots are expensive because they require a blacksmith with real skill to forge them properly. Yours has a small crack near the rim. Not enough to make it unusable, but enough that you have to be careful about filling it too full. You keep meaning to take it to the blacksmith for repair, but that costs money, and there's always something else that needs money more urgently. The fire pops, sending a small shower of sparks upward. They drift toward the roof, opening like tiny orange fireflies, winking out one by one as they cool in the air. You watch them absently, your mind starting to slow down after the day's work. This is your favorite time. Not quite dinner, not quite sleep, just this in-between period when the day's labor is finished and the evening's rest hasn't quite begun. Your son adds another piece of wood to the fire. He's learning, slowly, how to maintain it properly. Not too much wood at once, which smothers the flames, but enough to keep the heat steady. He positions the log carefully, creating space for air to circulate underneath. Good technique. You nod approval, and he glances at you with that particular expression children have when they're pleased to have done something right. These are the moments that matter, you think. Not the big events, not the harvests or the holy days, but these quiet evenings by the fire, your family around you, everyone safe and warm and together. The flames continue their ancient dance, consuming wood, releasing heat and light, transforming solid matter into energy and ash. It's a kind of magic, really, though the priest would scold you for calling it that. They say only God works magic. But this fire, this controlled combustion that keeps you alive through winter, feels pretty magical to you. Outside, full darkness has fallen now. The world beyond your door has become hostile territory. Cold, dark, potentially dangerous. Wolves still roam the forests. Thieves might be on the roads. Even just getting lost in the dark could be fatal if you wandered off a path and injured yourself. But inside, you're safe. The fire sees to that. It's been seeing to that for longer than anyone can remember, and it will continue doing so long after you're gone. Some things, as it turns out, don't need to change. Your wife ladles pottage into wooden bowls. Steam rises from each serving, carrying the smell of barley, peas, onions, and, if you're lucky, a hint of the bacon fat she added for flavor. Not actual bacon, mind you, just the fat trimmed from the piece you're saving for Sunday. But even that small addition transforms the meal from sustenance into something almost enjoyable. Pottage is what you eat most days. It's what everyone eats most days, unless they're wealthy enough to afford variety or poor enough that they're skipping meals entirely. The word itself will eventually become porridge, but right now it refers to any thick stew made from whatever ingredients are available. Today's version is relatively good. The barley came from your own small plot, the peas from your wife's garden, the onions from the bunch you harvested in autumn and have been hoarding in a basket ever since. In summer, pottage might contain cabbage, leeks, beans, maybe some herbs. In winter, it becomes a rotation of grains and dried legumes, occasionally enlivened by a turnip or some kale that survived the frost. Historians still argue whether medieval peasant diets were nutritionally adequate. Some scholars point out that grains, legumes, and vegetables can provide complete nutrition if combined properly. Others note the frequent mentions of hunger in historical records, the evidence of malnutrition in skeletal remains, the fact that bad harvests meant people simply went hungry. Both things are probably true. In good years, you eat adequately. In bad years, you don't. You take your bowl and sit on the bench near the fire. The wood is smooth from years of use, worn down by countless family meals. Your father-in-law gets the chair, his privilege as the eldest, while everyone else makes do with benches or, in your children's case, sitting on the floor on folded blankets. There are no tables. You eat with the bowl in your lap, using a wooden spoon carved by your grandfather. The spoon is darkened with age and use, the grain of the wood visible beneath decades of absorbed stew. You've eaten from this spoon your entire life, and your son will probably eat from it after you're gone. Objects last in medieval life, because making new ones requires time and resources you don't always have. The pottage is hot, almost too hot, and you have to blow on each spoonful before eating. The barley has cooked down into a thick, porridge-like consistency, binding everything together into a coherent mass. It's not fancy, but it's filling, and after a full day of physical labor, filling is what matters. Your daughter eats slowly, her small hands wrapped around her bowl for warmth. She's already mostly asleep, functioning on autopilot, her body demanding food even as her mind drifts toward unconsciousness. Your wife helps her, occasionally bringing the spoon to her lips when she seems too drowsy to manage it herself. These are the tender moments that make up a life. Not grand events, just a mother feeding a tired child by firelight. The pottage has a slightly smoky flavor from the fire, which is unavoidable when you're cooking over an open hearth. Everything tastes a bit like smoke in your world: the food, the water you heat for washing, even the air you breathe. You don't think about it anymore. It's just how things taste. Your son finishes his bowl quickly and looks hopefully toward the pot. There's enough for seconds, barely, and your wife ladles him another portion. He's 8, at that age where he seems to be constantly hungry, growing upward and outward in ways that require enormous amounts of fuel. You remember being that age yourself. Remember the feeling that no amount of food could quite satisfy you. He'll slow down eventually. For now, you let him eat. The bacon fat was a good addition. You can taste it now, that savory richness that makes the whole meal more satisfying. Fat is precious in your diet, hard to come by unless you slaughter an animal or have access to butter and cheese. Most days, your meals are almost entirely fat-free, which means you're constantly hungry even after eating. It's one reason medieval people seemed obsessed with meat when they could get it. Not just for the protein, but for the fat, the caloric density, the way it satisfied hunger in a way that vegetables simply couldn't. Your wife eats last, taking the smallest portion, which is typical. She always ensures everyone else has enough before worrying about herself. You've tried to break her of this habit, reminding her that she needs strength too, but it's so ingrained in her understanding of her role that she does it almost unconsciously. Women's work is invisible in most historical records, but it's women's work that keeps households functioning. The cooking, the cleaning, the endless small tasks that transform raw materials into meals, chaos into order, cold spaces into homes. Your wife manages all of this while also spinning wool, tending the garden, caring for children, and helping in the fields during harvest. You couldn't survive without her. Nobody could, though men in your era rarely say such things out loud. The meal is winding down now. Your father-in-law scrapes his bowl clean with a piece of dark bread, soaking up every last drop before eating the bread itself. Waste is unthinkable when food requires this much effort to produce. Every grain of barley in that pot represents someone's labor: plowing, planting, weeding, harvesting, threshing, grinding. Wasting it would be almost sinful. Your daughter has fallen asleep, still holding her bowl. Your wife gently takes it from her, setting it aside, then adjusts the child's position so she's lying more comfortably. She'll move her to the sleeping pallets soon, but for now, there's no harm in letting her rest where she is. The fire crackles softly. Outside, you can hear wind picking up, rattling the shuttered window. It's going to be a cold night, the kind where you wake up multiple times to add wood to the fire, ensuring the hut stays warm enough for everyone to sleep. But that's later. Right now, your belly is full, your family is safe, and the fire is still burning bright. These are the things you pray for when you pray. Not wealth or status or adventure. Just this. Food, warmth, family, safety. The simple things that make life possible. The simple things that, in 1450, are never quite guaranteed. The transition from eating to sleeping requires preparation. Not much, but enough that it becomes a small ritual, a series of familiar actions that signal to your body that rest is coming soon. Your wife rises first, collecting the wooden bowls and stacking them near the water bucket. They'll be rinsed tomorrow morning. No point wasting effort on washing dishes at night when you're all exhausted. A quick wipe with a cloth removes the worst of the residue, and that's sufficient until dawn. The sleeping area occupies roughly a third of the hut's floor space. It's not a separate room, obviously, just a section near the hearth where you've arranged pallets made from wooden frames and stuffed with straw. In wealthier households, these might be proper mattresses filled with wool or even feathers. In your home, straw does the job adequately. Adequately being the operative word. The straw needs replacing every few months because it compacts and gets infested with insects and generally becomes less comfortable over time. You changed it about 6 weeks ago, so right now it's still relatively fresh, still providing decent cushioning between your body and the hard ground beneath. Your wife begins arranging the sleeping space with practiced efficiency. She shakes out the straw in each pallet, fluffing it up to restore some loft. Then she spreads a layer of coarse linen sheets over each one. Well, sheets is generous. They're really just large pieces of undyed linen cloth, rough and scratchy, but better than sleeping directly on straw. Over the sheets go the blankets. You own 4 wool blankets, which sounds like a lot until you realize you're trying to keep 6 people warm through an English winter. The blankets are heavy, dense weaves in natural gray and brown tones, made from the wool of your own sheep. Your wife spent weeks last spring carding, spinning, and weaving the wool into fabric. It's incredible work when you think about it. Taking a sheep's fleece and transforming it into a warm, functional textile through nothing but hand tools and skill. Historians debate whether medieval people appreciated the labor that went into everyday objects or whether familiarity bred a kind of blindness to the effort involved. You suspect it's somewhere in between. You know intellectually how much work went into these blankets, but you also take them somewhat for granted because you've always had blankets, have never known a world without them. The sleeping arrangement follows a specific pattern. Your father-in-law gets the pallet closest to the fire, which is his right as the eldest and also a practical consideration given his age and the way cold seems to settle into his joints. Next to him, your son will sleep. Then you and your wife, with your daughter between you for warmth and security. 2 people per pallet, essentially, except your daughter barely counts as a full person in terms of space requirements, so she fits easily between you and your wife without crowding. Medieval people slept close together partly for warmth, but also because they had no real concept of personal space the way modern people understand it. Privacy is a luxury, and you don't have access to luxuries. Your wife retrieves the furs from their storage spot near the wall. You own 2. One rabbit fur that's seen better days, with patches where the leather backing has torn and been crudely stitched back together, and one sheepskin that's relatively new, acquired last winter when you slaughtered an old ewe who'd stopped producing lambs. The furs go on top of the blankets as an extra layer of insulation. Rabbit fur is surprisingly warm for how thin it is, trapping air between the individual hairs and creating dead space that resists heat loss. The sheepskin is even better, thick and woolly, though you have to be careful because it still carries a faint animal smell that intensifies when it gets wet, which happens whenever the roof leaks, which is more often than you'd like. Your son is already claiming his spot, burrowing under the blankets with the single-minded focus of an exhausted child. Your father-in-law moves more slowly, lowering himself onto the pallet with a grunt that might be pain or might just be the sound of old joints protesting. He's 63, which makes him ancient by medieval standards. Most people don't live this long. The fact that he's still reasonably healthy, still able to contribute to household tasks, is remarkable. But you can see age catching up with him, the way he moves more stiffly each winter, The way his hand shakes slightly when he's tired, the increasing frequency of the cough that rattles in his chest. You don't think about it too much. Thinking about it means confronting mortality, and mortality is already too present in medieval life to warrant additional contemplation. Your wife picks up your sleeping daughter and carries her to the pallet. The child barely stirs, her body completely limp with exhaustion. You remember this stage of childhood, the way young bodies would simply shut down when they'd reached their limit, bypassing the intermediate stages of drowsiness and moving straight to unconsciousness. She'll sleep through the night without waking, unless she gets cold, which is always a possibility despite your best efforts at layering blankets and maintaining the fire. You add several larger logs to the hearth before settling down yourself. Oak, mostly positioned carefully to burn slow and steady through the night. The fire will die down to coals eventually. You can't keep flames going for 8 hours without constant attention, but the coals will radiate enough heat to keep the immediate area around the hearth tolerably warm. Tolerably being, again, the operative word. Your sleeping spot is perhaps 6 feet from the fire, close enough to benefit from the heat, but far enough that stray sparks won't land on you. You've calibrated this distance through years of experience, knowing exactly where the warmth zone ends and the cold zone begins. You lie down on the pallet, feeling the straw compress beneath your weight. The linen sheet is scratchy against your face, and you can feel individual pieces of straw poking through the fabric here and there, but you're too tired to care. Your wife settles beside you, and you feel her warmth immediately, her body heat adding to the layers of blankets and furs. Your daughter is between you, one small hand resting on your arm. Outside, the wind continues to blow, and you can hear the thatch rustling overhead, a sound like waves on a shore, rhythmic and almost soothing once you get used to it. The fire pops quietly, one of the logs shifting as it burns. You close your eyes, feeling sleep beginning to pull at the edges of your consciousness. Not yet, though. Not quite yet. In the darkness at the far end of the hut, something shuffles and bleats softly. Your goats, 2 of them, a mother and her yearling kid, occupying the section of the hut that's separated from your living space by a low wattle fence. It's perhaps 4 feet tall, enough to keep the animals contained, but not so high that you can't step over it when necessary. They've settled down for the night, mostly. The mother goat is lying in the straw you spread for them earlier, chewing her cud in that methodical, rhythmic way goats have. The kid is restless, shifting position, occasionally making small sounds that goats make when they're comfortable but not quite asleep. You've shared your home with animals your entire life. It's normal, practical, almost universal among peasant households. The animals provide warmth, their body heat radiating across the hut, raising the ambient temperature by several precious degrees. They also provide security in a strange way, because if something threatens the hut at night, they'll react before you wake. Plus, keeping them inside means they're less likely to be stolen. Theft is a constant concern in medieval village life, not because your neighbors are inherently dishonest, but because everyone lives so close to subsistence that temptation can overpower morality when someone is desperate enough. A goat represents significant wealth. Milk, eventually meat, the possibility of breeding and increasing your herd. Losing one would be devastating. So inside, they come when darkness falls, and you all coexist in this shared space, humans and animals, in an arrangement that would seem bizarre to someone from a later century, but makes perfect sense in 1450. The smell is noticeable, not overwhelming exactly. You've gotten used to it the way you've gotten used to smoke and the scent of unwashed bodies and all the other odors that define medieval domestic life. But if someone were to enter your hut with a modern nose, they'd probably find it challenging. Goat dung has a particular sharpness to it. You clean out their area regularly, spreading fresh straw, removing the soil material to add to your compost pile. But between cleanings, there's an inevitable accumulation of waste and the smell that comes with it. Historians studying medieval life often focus on the visual, the architecture, the clothing, the artifacts that survive in museum collections. But they sometimes neglect the olfactory reality The fact that medieval people lived in a world of strong, persistent smells that would be considered intolerable by modern standards. You don't think about it that way, of course. This is just how homes smell. Your home, your neighbor's home, everyone's home except perhaps the manor house. And even there you suspect it's not that different once you get past the fancy tapestries. The goats are valuable beyond their immediate utility. The mother produces about a quart of milk daily, which your wife uses for drinking, cooking, occasionally making a soft cheese when there's enough surplus. Goat's milk is easier to digest than cow's milk for some people, and goats themselves are easier to keep than cows. They eat less, require less space, and are generally hardier. Your cow-owning neighbors probably look down on you slightly for keeping goats instead. There's a subtle hierarchy even among peasants, with those who own cows ranking slightly above those who own only goats or sheep. It's ridiculous when you think about it. You're all struggling to survive, all subject to the same lord, all living in essentially identical huts. But humans create status distinctions even in poverty. The kid makes a louder sound now, almost a cry, and the mother responds with a low, rumbling bleat. You hear the kid moving, probably nursing, though it's old enough that it should be weaned. The mother is patient about it, letting the kid comfort nurse even though there's probably not much milk available at this hour. It reminds you of your own daughter, the way she still sometimes wants to be held and rocked like a baby even though she's 5 and increasingly independent. That need for comfort doesn't disappear just because you're technically old enough to do without it. In the summer, the goats would stay outside in a small pen attached to the hut. But winter is different. Winter requires consolidation, bringing everything valuable inside, where it can be protected from weather, predators, and thieves. So the goats come in, and you adapt to sharing your space, and it works well enough. Besides the goats, you also have chickens. 3 of them, currently roosting on a wooden perch you installed near the goat area. Chickens are even easier to keep than goats. They eat kitchen scraps, insects, whatever they can forage during the day. In return, they provide eggs, usually 3 or 4 per week during productive seasons. The eggs are precious. You don't eat them casually. They're saved for times when someone is sick and needs easily digestible nutrition, or traded for goods you can't produce yourself, or occasionally sold for a few pennies when you desperately need cash. Right now, the chickens are silent, having settled into whatever passes for sleep and chicken consciousness. They'll start making noise again before dawn, which serves as a natural alarm clock. Not that you need one. Your body has learned to wake at the appropriate time through years of agricultural routine. But the roosters crow anyway, announcing sunrise whether anyone needs the announcement or not. The presence of animals in your living space creates a kind of companionship that's hard to explain. They're not pets in the modern sense. You're not sentimental about them, and you'll kill and eat them when necessary without much emotional turmoil. But they're also not just property. They're fellow creatures sharing your space, depending on you for food and shelter, providing benefits in return. It's a relationship, just a different kind than pet ownership. Your father-in-law coughs in his sleep, a wet, rattling sound that worries you slightly. The goat mother shifts position, her hooves scraping against the wooden floor beneath her straw. One of the chickens makes a small, questioning sound, then falls silent again. These are the sounds of your household at night. Not silence, never silence, but a collection of small noises, breathing, shifting, the fire crackling, wind outside, animals moving, the thatch rustling, that together create a kind of domestic symphony. You find it soothing, actually, the proof that everyone and everything is present and accounted for, safe within these walls, protected from the darkness outside. The goat kid bleats one more time, softly, then apparently settles. You feel yourself relaxing more deeply into the straw pallet, the warmth of your wife beside you, your daughter's small hand still resting on your arm. Outside, something howls in the distance. A wolf, probably, or maybe a dog from another farm. But it's outside and you're inside, and that makes all the difference in the world. Your wife's voice is soft in the darkness. She's telling your son a story, speaking just loudly enough for him to hear, but not so loud that she disturbs your sleeping daughter. It's a tale you've heard before, Most people have heard it before, about a clever peasant who outwits a greedy nobleman through quick thinking and careful words. These stories circulate through villages like currency, passed from person to person, altered slightly with each telling, shaped by individual storytellers into versions that emphasize different lessons or add local flavor. The nobleman might be described as resembling the lord whose land you work, though never explicitly named, because that would be dangerous. The clever peasant always wins in these stories, which is wish fulfillment, obviously, because in real life, peasants rarely outwit their social superiors without consequences. But the stories persist because they offer a kind of imaginative justice, a world where cunning can overcome power, where the underdog triumphs through wit rather than wealth. Your son is fighting sleep, wanting to hear the ending even though he knows how it concludes. He's at that age where the familiar is still comforting, where hearing the same story again provides pleasure rather than boredom. In a few years, he'll want new stories, different adventures, but right now repetition is reassuring. Oral tradition is how most knowledge travels in your world. Books exist, certainly, but they're expensive objects owned by monasteries, churches, and the occasional wealthy nobleman. You've never held a book, never learned to read, and you don't know anyone in your village who can read beyond perhaps the priest, and even that's questionable. So information lives in memories and voices. Your father learned farming techniques from his father through demonstration and spoken instruction. You learned them the same way and will pass them to your son similarly. The stories, the songs, the prayers, the warnings about which plants are poisonous, all of it transmitted mouth to ear, generation to generation. Historians now recognize this as a sophisticated information system, not primitive but actually quite efficient for its context. Oral cultures develop remarkable memory techniques, embedding information in rhythm, rhyme, and narrative structure to make it easier to retain and recall. Your wife's storytelling voice has a particular cadence, a rise and fall that's almost musical. She's good at this, better than you are when you occasionally attempt stories. She knows how to pause for effect, how to lower her voice for dramatic moments, how to make even familiar tales feel fresh through the way she tells them. The story reaches its conclusion. The peasant reveals his clever plan. The nobleman is forced to admit defeat. Justice prevails. Your son makes a satisfied sound, a kind of sleepy affirmation that he heard and approved. Then silence, as he finally surrenders to exhaustion. But the impulse to tell stories by firelight is ancient, older than agriculture, older than permanent settlements. Your ancestors were telling stories in caves while mammoths roamed outside, using narrative to bind communities together, to pass down crucial survival information, to make sense of a mysterious world. And here you are in 1450, still doing essentially the same thing for essentially the same reasons. The fire provides the focal point, just as it did for those cave dwellers. Something about flames and darkness creates the perfect environment for storytelling. The flickering light makes faces more expressive, shadows more dramatic. The circle of warmth creates an intimate space separate from the threatening world beyond. You can imagine a future historian studying medieval peasant life and missing this entirely. The nightly ritual of stories by firelight, the oral culture that sustained communities, the way narrative shaped understanding. They'll study the artifacts, the buildings, the legal documents, and overlook the invisible infrastructure of voices and memories. Your father-in-law is snoring now, a rhythmic rasping that you've learned to tune out most nights. Your wife settles back onto the pallet beside you, her storytelling duty fulfilled for the evening. You feel her relax, her breathing beginning to deepen as she moves towards sleep. The goat kid bleats once more, then falls silent. Outside, the wind has calmed slightly, though you can still hear it testing the thatch, looking for weaknesses. So far, the roof is holding, which means you might actually sleep through the night without water dripping on you. Small victories matter in medieval life. You think about the story your wife just told, about cleverness triumphing over power. It's a nice fantasy, and you understand why these tales persist. They offer hope, a sense that the world might occasionally bend toward fairness, even when daily experience suggests otherwise. But you also know the truth. Most peasants who try to outwit their lords end up in worse situations than they started in. The real survival strategy isn't cleverness, but compliance, careful management of obligations, staying below notice. You work the required days in the Lord's fields, you pay your rents on time, you don't cause trouble or draw attention. That's how you protect your family. Still, the stories serve a purpose beyond entertainment. They preserve a kind of dignity, a reminder that even in powerlessness, people retain their humanity, their capacity for thought and creativity and resistance, even if that resistance remains mostly imaginary. Your daughter shifts in her sleep, her small hand tightening briefly on your arm before relaxing again. She's dreaming, probably, though you'll never know about what. Medieval people paid attention to dreams, believed they carried messages, warnings, prophecies. But children's dreams were considered less significant, just the random firings of young minds processing daily experiences. You hope she's dreaming of something pleasant. Summer sunshine, perhaps, or the taste of honey, or playing with the neighbor's cat. The fire has died down considerably now. More coals than flames, though still radiating enough heat to keep the immediate area comfortable. You'll need to add more wood in a few hours, but not yet. Right now, you could just rest. The stories have done their work, settled the household, provided entertainment, strengthened the bonds between family members through shared narrative. Tomorrow, there will be more work, more challenges, more of the grinding routine that defines peasant existence. But tonight, there are stories. And stories, it turns out, matter more than you might think. They're how you remember who you are when everything else is trying to make you forget. The hut settles into its nighttime symphony. Not silence. There's never true silence in medieval life, but a collection of sounds that together define the hours between sleep and waking. Your father-in-law's snoring provides the bass line, steady and rhythmic. It's loud enough that you wonder how your son sleeps through it. But children have a remarkable ability to sleep through nearly anything when they're truly exhausted. The fire contributes its own percussion. Small pops and cracks as sap pockets in the wood superheat and explode. The occasional louder snap when a log shifts position, sending up a small shower of sparks. The constant low whisper of flames consuming fuel, a sound so familiar you barely register it consciously anymore. Outside, the wind is the dominant voice. It's picked up again, moving through the thatch with a sound like rushing water. Medieval roofs weren't silent the way modern roofs are. All that layered straw creates a complex acoustic landscape, amplifying and transforming wind into something almost alive. Sometimes, on particularly stormy nights, it sounds like the roof is breathing. You can hear the village beyond your walls, though barely. A dog barking 3 houses over, the sound carrying clearly through the cold night air. Someone's door banging, probably not secured properly, and you make a mental note to check yours in the morning because a loose door in winter is asking for trouble. Distance sounds different at night in the medieval world. Without artificial light or background noise from machinery, sounds travel farther and more clearly. You can hear things happening half a mile away that would be completely inaudible during the day when normal village activity creates a general din. Historians studying medieval life often overlook the acoustic environment, but it shaped daily experience significantly. People learned to identify neighbors by their footsteps, to distinguish between different carts passing on the road by the specific sounds their wheels made, to read weather patterns through subtle changes in how wind moved through trees. Your world is smaller geographically than modern lives, but in some ways more detailed, more intimately known. The goats are settling down now. Their movements sound becoming less frequent. The mother has finished whatever ruminant process she was engaged in and appears to be sleeping, her breathing deep and steady enough that you can hear it from your palate. Animals sleep differently than humans. More lightly, always half alert for danger, ready to startle awake at unfamiliar sounds. It's one reason having them in the hut provides a security benefit. Their senses are sharper than yours, particularly the goat's hearing, and they'll react to threats before you're conscious of them. Your daughter makes a small sound in her sleep, something between a sigh and a whimper. You feel her shift position, moving closer to your wife, seeking warmth and comfort even in unconsciousness. Your wife's arm automatically adjusts to accommodate her, a gesture so practiced it happens without waking. These tiny movements of care and connection, they're invisible to history, but essential to life. The thatch overhead rustles more insistently as a stronger gust hits the roof. You've learned to distinguish between normal wind sounds and concerning ones. This is normal, just winter weather doing what winter weather does. If you heard sustained roaring or the sharp crack of structural damage, that would be worth waking fully and investigating. But this is fine. The roof is solid, the walls are holding, everything is as it should be. Somewhere far away, maybe a mile or more, you hear a wolf howl. It's a lonely sound, eerie in the darkness, and it makes you glad you're inside with a fire and walls between you and whatever's moving in the forest. Wolves aren't the dire threat folklore makes them out to be. They generally avoid humans and settlements, but they're still dangerous if you're alone or vulnerable. The howl dies away, unanswered. Either the wolf is solitary or its pack is too far away to respond. You listen for a moment longer, then let the sound fade from your attention. Your son shifts on his pallet, mumbling something incomprehensible in his sleep. Children talk in their sleep more than adults, their dream worlds apparently demanding verbal expression even when consciousness is absent. You can't make out any actual words, just a string of sleepy syllables that mean nothing but somehow seem urgent to his dreaming mind. The chickens are completely silent now, having achieved whatever passes for deep sleep in chickens. They'll stay that way until first light, when some internal clock tells them it's time to start announcing the dawn, whether anyone wants it announced or not. You're getting drowsy yourself. Finally, the day's exhaustion catching up with you now that you're warm and horizontal. Your muscles are starting to relax, releasing the tension they've held since before dawn when you began the day's labor. But you're not quite asleep yet. There's something pleasant about this liminal space, this half-awake state where you're conscious enough to appreciate your surroundings, but relaxed enough that thought becomes loose and dreamlike. The fire glows steadily, coals pulsing with internal heat. Wind moves through thatch with that rushing water sound. Your father-in-law snores. Your daughter breathes softly. The goats shift occasionally in their straw. This is your world at night, a small sphere of warmth and life surrounded by darkness and cold. And for tonight, it's enough. More than enough, actually. It's everything you need. Sleep doesn't come all at once in the medieval world. You drift off gradually, consciousness fading in stages, and then, sometime later, you're not sure how much later, you wake again. Not fully, not with alarm, just a gentle surfacing into awareness that tells you it's the middle of the night. This is normal, expected even. Historians studying sleep patterns across cultures have discovered something fascinating. The 8-hour consolidated sleep block that modern people consider natural is actually quite recent, a product of artificial lighting and industrial work schedules. Before that, humans slept differently. First sleep and second sleep, they call it now, though you wouldn't use those terms. You just say you woke up in the night, the way everyone does, and that's perfectly normal. You lie still for a moment, assessing. The fire has died down considerably, mostly coals now, barely glowing in the darkness. The hut is noticeably cooler than when you fell asleep, though not yet cold enough to be uncomfortable under your layers of blankets and furs. Your wife is awake too, you realize. Her breathing has changed from the deep rhythm of sleep to something lighter, more conscious. She's probably been awake longer than you, waiting to see if you'd surface on your own or if she'd need to wake you for fire duty. You don't speak. No need to wake the others, but you shift slightly and she responds with a small movement of acknowledgement. These wordless communications happen constantly in marriage. You've been together long enough to read each other's states through tiny signals, breathing patterns, small movements, the particular quality of stillness that distinguishes someone awake from someone sleeping. You ease yourself out from under the blankets, moving carefully to avoid disturbing your daughter. The cold hits immediately, raising goosebumps on your arms despite the wool tunic you never bothered removing before sleep. Medieval people often slept in their clothes during winter, partially for warmth, partially because undressing and redressing in a freezing hut seems like unnecessary suffering. The packed earth floor is shockingly cold against your feet. You'd left your leather shoes near the pallet, but you don't bother putting them on for this short trip to the hearth. You'll be quick. Add wood, ensure the fire catches properly, then return to warmth. The hut is deeply dark away from the hearth's faint glow. Your eyes adjust gradually, shapes emerging from blackness, the darker rectangle of the door, the subtle difference in texture where walls meet floor, the vague forms of your sleeping family. You move toward the hearth by memory and feel as much as sight, your feet knowing the path through years of repetition. The wood pile is exactly where you left it, and you select pieces by touch. A couple of smaller splits that will catch quickly from the coals, then larger pieces that will burn slow and steady through the remaining night hours. The coals are still alive, glowing deep red when you blow on them gently. It's remarkable how long we can hold heat, how these seemingly dead embers contain enough energy to ignite fresh fuel. You position the kindling carefully, creating space for air circulation, and blow again, steady and patient. A small flame appears, tentative at first, then growing bolder as it finds purchase in the dry wood. Success. You add the smaller pieces, watching to ensure they catch properly. Fire maintenance is a skill you've practiced your entire life, knowing exactly how much wood to add, how to arrange it, when to blow and when to wait. Get it wrong, and you either smother the flames or create an inferno that wastes wood and risks setting the thatch ablaze. Get it right, and you have steady, sustainable heat through the night. The flames grow, casting dancing light across the walls, transforming the hut from complete darkness into a space of flickering shadows and warm orange glow. Your wife sits up on the pallet, your daughter still sleeping between her and your father-in-law's snoring form. She doesn't come to the fire. No need, and it would risk waking the children. But she watches you work, her face visible now in the renewed firelight. This is the time for the day's second half of conversation, when couples might talk quietly about things that got overlooked in the busy daylight hours. Plans for tomorrow, concerns about the children, observations about the neighbors, worries about money or food, or the 100 other problems that press on peasant life. Tonight, though, you're both too drowsy for much conversation. Just the comfortable silence of people who know each other well enough that words aren't always necessary. You add the larger pieces of wood now, positioning them to burn slowly. These should last until dawn, maybe longer, meaning you won't need to wake again unless something goes wrong. The fire responds beautifully, flames curling around the new fuel, and you feel satisfied in that small way that comes from completing a task competently. The warmth is already spreading, radiating outward from the renewed flames. You can feel it on your face, your hands, driving back the cold that had crept in during the hours when the fire was reduced to coals. Medieval people understood cold in ways modern people rarely experience. Not the temporary discomfort of walking from car to building, but the sustained, bone-deep chill of living in poorly insulated structures with inadequate heating. Fire wasn't luxury in your world. It was the difference between survival and dying of exposure in your own home. You stand there a moment longer, warming yourself, letting your body absorb heat before returning to the cold pallet. Your wife has already laid back down, pulled the blankets back over herself and your daughter. There's a spot waiting for you, still slightly warm from your body heat. The fire crackles cheerfully now, fully engaged in the process of consumption and combustion. Outside, you can hear that the wind has died down almost completely. The world has entered that deep night stillness that comes in the hours before dawn, when even the nocturnal creatures have settled and the diurnal ones haven't yet stirred. You slip back under the blankets, feeling the contrast between the cold air and the relative warmth you've preserved beneath the wool and fur. Your daughter murmurs something, but doesn't wake. Your wife's breathing is already deepening again, returning to sleep now that the fire is tended and the household secure for the remainder of the night. You close your eyes, feeling the pull of second sleep beginning. This is how nights pass in 1450. Not in one consolidated block, but in phases, with these wakeful interludes that allow for fire tending, prayer, conversation, or simply lying in the darkness, conscious and thinking. It's not worse than modern sleep, just different. Maybe even better in some ways. More natural, more aligned with human biology's ancient rhythms. But you don't think about it in those terms. You just sleep the way everyone sleeps, waking and sleeping, sleeping and waking, until morning finally comes and the whole process begins again. The watchful hours have their own particular quality. A stillness that's different from evening drowsiness or morning anticipation. This is the deep middle of the night, when time seems suspended, when the world outside has contracted to nothing more than the sphere of firelight warming your hut. You're not fully awake, but not quite asleep either. Drifting in that state, medieval people would have recognized instantly, but wouldn't have bothered naming. It's just part of the night, this period of semi-consciousness when your mind wanders freely, unburdened by the demands of waking life. Your wife shifts beside you, and you realize she's awake too. Not unusual. These midnight hours are often shared, though not always with conversation. Sometimes just the awareness of another person's wakefulness is companionship enough. Tonight, though, she speaks, her voice barely above a whisper. The roof held. You make a small sound of agreement. It's true, despite the wind earlier, despite the persistent leak in the northeast corner, the thatch is keeping the weather out tonight. Small victories deserve acknowledgement, even if they're just the house doing what houses are supposed to do. These conversations in the middle of the night have a different character than daytime talk. More honest, somehow. Quieter, certainly, but also more direct. The darkness and the drowsiness strip away the usual social performances, leaving just two people speaking plainly to each other. Your father's cough is worse, she says after a pause. You'd notice that too, but hearing it spoken aloud makes it more real, more worrying. It's winter, you say, which isn't really an answer but is true nonetheless. Everyone coughs more in winter, the cold, the smoke, the damp. Most people recover when spring comes. Most people, not all. The thought hangs between you, unspoken but present. Your father-in-law is old, and old people don't always recover from winter illnesses. You've seen it happen to others. A cough that starts mild but deepens, becomes persistent, eventually becomes something more serious. But worrying about it in the middle of the night won't change anything. Your wife seems to understand this because she doesn't pursue the topic further. Instead, she's quiet for a moment, and you can hear her breathing in the darkness, steady and calm. The boy did well with the fire, she says eventually. This makes you smile slightly. It's true. Your son is learning, developing competence in the small skills that will eventually allow him to manage his own household. Fire tending, animal care, reading weather signs, knowing when to plant and when to harvest. The education of medieval children happens through observation and practice, not formal schooling. Your son watches you work, then tries it himself, then gradually improves through repetition and correction. Historians studying medieval childhood note that children were expected to contribute economically to households from young ages. But they also recognized that this work was structured as learning. You were teaching when you nodded approval earlier. Your son was learning when he carefully positioned that log on the fire. These micro-interactions of instruction and practice happen constantly, almost invisibly, transferring knowledge across generations. He'll be a good man, your wife says, and there's something in her voice, pride mixed with worry, hope mixed with the recognition that the world is difficult and uncertain. You reach over, finding her hand in the darkness, squeezing it briefly. Words aren't always necessary. Outside, something moves past the hut, probably a cat from one of the neighboring houses, hunting mice in the darkness. You hear its footsteps, soft but distinct in the night's stillness, then fading as it continues on whatever feline business occupies cats at midnight. The goats are sleeping soundly now, their breathing deep and regular. The chickens haven't made a sound in hours. Even your father-in-law's snoring has become less aggressive, settling into a steady rhythm that's almost soothing in its predictability. These are the hours when prayers happen, when medieval people would speak to God or saints about their concerns. Your wife murmurs something, probably a prayer for your father-in-law's health, for the children's safety, for the coming harvest. You're not especially devout by the standards of your time, but you understand the impulse to reach out into the darkness, to address the invisible forces that seem to control so much of your existence. Whether God hears prayers at midnight or noon probably doesn't matter. What matters is the speaking of them, the articulation of hope and fear, the small act of refusing to surrender completely to circumstances beyond your control. Your daughter makes a small sound in her sleep, something between a sigh and a hiccup. You feel her small body between you and your wife, warm and alive and completely vulnerable. The urge to protect her is overwhelming, instinctive, and completely at odds with the reality that you can't protect her from most of what threatens children in the medieval world. Disease, accidents, food shortages, the simple random cruelty of a world without modern medicine or safety standards. But you can keep her warm tonight. You can ensure she's fed, loved, taught the skills she'll need to survive. Sometimes that has to be enough. Your wife's breathing is deepening again, returning to sleep after this brief interval of wakefulness and whispered conversation. You feel yourself following her, consciousness beginning to slip away again. The fire burns steadily, consuming wood, producing heat and light. The walls hold back the winter cold. The roof keeps the weather outside where it belongs. And here, in this small sphere of safety and warmth, your family sleeps through the dark hours, protected by nothing more substantial than mud, straw, and human effort. But somehow, against all odds, it works. Night after night, year after year, generation after generation, people have survived in structures like this, have raised families, have found moments of peace and connection in the darkness between dusk and dawn. You're part of that continuity now, just another link in a chain stretching backward and forward through time, doing what humans have always done, protecting the vulnerable, maintaining the fire, hoping for tomorrow to be at least as good as today. The watchful hours pass. Sleep returns, and the night continues its slow progress toward morning. Dreams arrive like uninvited guests in the second sleep. Vivid, strange, more intense somehow than the dreams of early evening. You're not sure if this is actually true or just your perception, but medieval people believed the dreams that came in the deep night carried more significance than others. You're dreaming now, though you wouldn't call it pleasant exactly. You're in the Lord's fields, but they stretch impossibly far in every direction, and no matter how much you plow, there's always more ground ahead. Your ox has vanished, and you're pulling the plow yourself, the leather harness cutting into your shoulders. The sky overhead is the wrong color. Not quite purple, not quite gray. Then you're in the village church, except the walls are made of water that somehow holds its shape, and the priest is speaking, but in a language that sounds like wind moving through trees. You need to confess something, but you can't remember what, and the anxiety of forgotten obligation builds in your chest. Now you're younger, a child, running through fields that might be the ones you actually remember from your own childhood, or might be completely invented by your sleeping mind. Medieval people took dreams seriously. They believed dreams could carry messages from God, warnings from saints, even, though the church disapproved of this notion, communications from the dead. A particularly vivid dream might send someone to consult the village priest for interpretation, especially if it seemed to predict future events or contained recognizable symbols. Historians still argue about whether medieval dream interpretation was genuine belief or social performance, whether people truly thought their dreams meant something or just felt obligated to pretend they did. Probably some of both, as with most aspects of medieval religious life. Your dream shifts again, the way dreams do, and now you're standing in your hut, but it's somehow larger inside than outside, and there are rooms you've never seen before leading off in impossible directions. Your daughter is calling for you, but you can't find her, and the panic rises. Then you're awake, not gradually, but suddenly, jerked into consciousness by your own anxiety, your heart beating faster than it should. The hut is exactly as you left it, small, familiar. Your daughter sleeping peacefully beside you with no awareness that she's just been crying for you in a dream that wasn't real. You lie still, breathing slowly, waiting for your heart to settle. It's just the deep night confusion, the way dreams can feel more real than reality for those first few seconds after waking. You've experienced this before, will experience it again, and it means nothing beyond the random firing of a sleeping brain. Probably. Your wife is sleeping soundly now, her breathing deep and even. On the far pallet, your father-in-law has rolled onto his side, which seems to have stopped his snoring. Your son is motionless, lost in whatever dreams occupy 8-year-old minds, probably more pleasant than adult dreams. You hope. The fire is burned down again, but is still alive, still glowing. You calculate mentally whether it needs attention or will last until natural waking. Probably fine, you decide. No need to disturb your return to sleep for marginal fire maintenance. Dreams were sometimes discussed the next morning, especially if they seemed significant. Your wife might wake with a dream about her dead mother and spend breakfast quietly thinking about it, perhaps saying a prayer for the soul of the departed. Your son might dream of adventure and bore everyone with the details, the way children do, not yet understanding that other people's dreams are rarely interesting to hear about. You yourself rarely share dreams, finding them too ephemeral and strange to adequately describe. How do you explain the feeling of a dream, the emotional texture that seems so important while asleep but dissolves upon waking? The words you'd use would be inadequate to the experience, so you stay silent. But they linger anyway, these night visions, coloring your mood in ways you don't fully recognize, influencing thoughts and feelings throughout the day. Medieval people understood this, noted how dreams could leave them feeling unsettled or uplifted, anxious or peaceful. They just attributed it to external forces, God, saints, demons, rather than internal psychology. Same phenomenon, different framework for understanding. Your daughter shifts in her sleep, and for a moment you wonder what she dreams about. Children's dreams were generally considered less meaningful than adults, just the mind processing daily experiences without deeper significance. But you suspect she dreams more than you know, of playing, of food, of the neighbor's dog she likes, of magic and stories, and the limitless imagination of childhood. You hope her dreams are kind to her. The world will be harsh enough when she's older, when she understands more about the constraints and difficulties of peasant life. For now, let her dream of impossible things, of happiness without limit, of a future uncomplicated by reality. You're drifting again yourself, consciousness becoming less focused, thoughts beginning to take on that loose, associative quality that precedes sleep. The dream about the endless field is already fading, losing its emotional intensity, becoming just vague images that you'll probably forget entirely by morning. That's how dreams work. Urgent and meaningful in the moment, then evaporating like morning dew when examined in daylight. Outside, somewhere in the village, a rooster crows. It's far too early. The bird is confused, perhaps disturbed by a fox, or just mistaken about the time. Roosters are reliable, but not infallible timekeepers. No one else in the hut stirs at the sound, which is good. False dawn wake-ups are frustrating, leaving you caught between sleep and waking, too alert to easily drift off, but too tired to justify starting the day. You close your eyes again, deliberately slowing your breathing, inviting sleep to return. The fire glows, the family sleeps, and outside the darkness continues its slow transformation toward the gray light that will eventually become morning. But that's still hours away. For now, there's just the warmth, the breathing, the small sounds of a household at rest, and dreams, waiting patiently for you to surrender consciousness again, ready to take you wherever dreams take people in the deep watches of the night. The air in the hut has a particular quality you've never really thought to question. Thick almost, layered with scents that would overwhelm someone stepping in from outside, but that you barely register anymore, because this is just what air smells like indoors. Wood smoke dominates everything, of course. That sharp, resinous scent that clings to every surface, every textile, every strand of hair on your head. It's so pervasive that you only notice it when you've been outside for hours and return to find it hits you fresh before your nose adjusts again within minutes. The smoke smell varies depending on what you're burning. Oak produces a cleaner smoke than pine. Wet wood creates an acrid, eye-watering quality. Very old, dry wood burns almost sweet. Right now, the air carries that oak smoke scent, pleasant enough in its way, familiar as breathing. Beneath the smoke, there's the animal presence. The goats contribute their particular musk. Not unpleasant exactly, but definitely noticeable. It's a warm, slightly sweet smell mixed with the sharper note of their waste, even though you clean their area regularly. Animals smell like animals, and when animals live inside, the space smells accordingly. The chickens add their own note to this olfactory symphony, earthier and slightly dustier than the goats. Then there's the smell of bodies, human bodies that haven't bathed in weeks, because bathing in winter is asking for illness. Medieval people didn't bathe frequently by modern standards, partly due to practical limitations. Heating enough water is labor-intensive and fuel-expensive, and partly due to medical theories that suggested too much bathing was unhealthy. Historians still debate exactly how often medieval peasants bathe, with estimates ranging from a few times a year to monthly, depending on season, resources, and individual preference. You probably fall somewhere in the middle, occasional washing when weather permits and fuel is available, but nothing like the daily showers modern people consider normal. So there's sweat in the air, and the particular smell of wool clothing worn continuously, and the general human odor that comes from bodies working hard and living closely together. It's not offensive to medieval noses, which are calibrated differently than modern ones. You'd probably find modern scents equally strange. The chemical perfumes, the synthetic fabrics, the sanitized environment that smells of nothing in particular. Your world has honest smells, organic scents that tell you things about your environment. The straw on the floor contributes its own note. Fresh straw smells sweet and grassy, but as it ages and compacts and absorbs various liquids, it develops a more complex, earthier character. Right now your straw is about halfway through its life cycle, past the fresh stage, but not yet needing complete replacement. There's damp in the air too, especially near the walls where condensation forms. The contrast between the warm, moist air inside and the cold exterior causes water to bead on the interior surfaces of the wattle and daub. This dampness has its own smell, mineral and slightly moldy, though not unpleasantly so unless it gets out of hand. You can smell the remnants of dinner too, the pottage scent still lingering from the pot that hangs over the fire. Barley, onions, that hint of bacon fat, all mixed together and carried through the air on the smoke. It's a comfort smell, the olfactory promise of food and sustenance. Sometimes you can smell the seasons through the walls. In spring, there's a freshness that penetrates even the smoke-thick air, the scent of growing things and rain-washed earth. Summer brings the smell of sun-baked thatch, dry and warm. Autumn carries the scent of decay and harvest, of crops being processed and stored. Winter smells are different, cold and sharp, with the occasional intrusion of snow scent when wind blows through gaps in the walls. Tonight, the winter cold has a particular quality, clean and almost metallic, distinct from the warm organic smells inside the hut. Your wife's hair carries the scent of the lye soap she made last autumn. Strong stuff, harsh by modern standards, made from wood ash and animal fat in a process that's been refined over centuries of trial and error. It cleans adequately, but doesn't exactly leave you smelling pleasant. More like you've exchanged one set of odors for another. Your daughter smells like milk and child sweat and the particular sweetness of young humans, a scent that will disappear as she grows older, but right now is distinctly her own. Medieval people probably had stronger associations with personal scents than modern people do. Without artificial fragrances masking individual odors, you'd recognize people partially by how they smelled. Your wife's particular scent, your father's, your neighbor's. not consciously cataloged, but registered somewhere in your brain as part of their identity. The fire itself smells different at different stages of burning. Fresh flames have a livelier, more active scent. Banked coals smell deeper, more subdued. The ash accumulated around the hearth adds a dusty, mineral note to everything. Outside, the night air would smell completely different. Cleaner, certainly, colder, carrying whatever scents the wind brings from forest or field. But inside is its own microclimate, its own olfactory world, created by the combination of fire, animals, bodies, food, and the particular chemistry of wood smoke interacting with everything else. Historians studying medieval life often overlook this dimension entirely, focusing on what can be seen or documented while ignoring what was simply breathed day after day, year after year. But these smells shaped experience as much as anything visual did. They told you when dinner was ready, when the goats needed cleaning, when someone was sick, when fire needed attention. Your nose worked constantly, processing information, alerting you to changes in your environment. You're so drowsy now that even thinking about smells seems exhausting. Your consciousness is fragmenting again, thoughts becoming loose and disconnected, sleep pulling insistently. The air in the hut continues being what it's always been, thick with smoke and life and the particular scent of medieval peasant existence. And you breathe it in and out, until breathing and sleeping become the same thing, and thought dissolves entirely into rest. The cold finds its way in through cracks you can't see. Despite the fire, despite the layers of blankets, despite the combined body heat of 6 humans and assorted livestock, winter is winning the battle at the edges of your consciousness. Your nose is cold. It's the exposed part, the piece of you that sticks out from under the blankets and furs into the general air of the hut. The rest of you is tolerably warm. Not comfortable exactly, but warm enough to sleep. But your nose feels the real temperature, the reminder that February in England is not forgiving. You shift slightly, try to tuck your face more completely under the rabbit fur. It helps marginally. This is the worst part of winter nights in a medieval hut. The constant negotiation between warmth and breathability. Cover your face completely, and you can't breathe properly. Leave it exposed, and the cold attacks the most vulnerable parts. There's no perfect solution, just a series of uncomfortable compromises. Your daughter has somehow solved this problem by burrowing completely under the blankets, creating a small cave of warmth that she occupies entirely. You can see the lump where she is, can hear her breathing, slightly muffled by wool, but her face is completely hidden. Children are better at this than adults, more flexible, smaller, able to contort themselves into positions that would leave you cramping within minutes. The fire is lower now than it should be. You must have slept longer than you intended during that second sleep cycle. The coals are still alive, but producing minimal heat, certainly not enough to adequately warm the hut against the deep night cold. You should get up and add wood. You know you should. But the prospect of leaving the relative warmth of the palate, of exposing yourself to the full cold of the hut, of standing on the icy floor while tending fire, it's almost more than you can motivate yourself to do. Almost. Responsibility wins, barely, over comfort. You ease out from under the blankets and the cold hits like a physical blow. Your breath is visible in the air, small clouds of vapor forming with each exhalation. That's how cold it's gotten, cold enough to see your breath, even indoors with a fire burning. This is dangerous cold, not immediately life-threatening, but the kind that kills people over time if they can't maintain adequate heat. You've heard of it happening, elderly people or very young children who simply couldn't stay warm enough through a particularly harsh winter, their bodies gradually losing the battle against sustained cold exposure. Your feet on the floor are immediately, painfully cold. The packed earth has absorbed the chill from outside, becoming a thermal sink that draws heat from any living thing that touches it. You move quickly toward the fire, try to minimize contact time. The wood pile seems smaller than you remember. You'll need to bring more in from the outdoor stack tomorrow, which means venturing out into the cold, which means work and discomfort, which means another entry on the long list of winter tasks that make survival possible. Medieval peasants lived in a constant state of mild crisis during winter. Not dramatic catastrophe, usually, but sustained difficulty that required constant attention and effort. Running out of firewood could be fatal. Running out of food could be fatal. Letting the fire go out could be fatal. Failing to adequately maintain your shelter could be fatal. Every day was a series of small decisions that collectively determined whether you'd survive until spring. Historians studying medieval mortality rates note the winter spike, increased death from cold, illness, and the various complications that arose when bodies were stressed by sustained exposure to harsh conditions. You're acutely aware of this as you stack logs on the dying coals. Your hands are shaking slightly, whether from cold or the physical stress of being awake in the deep night. You're not sure, though it feels impossibly cold against your palms, as if the logs themselves are actively trying to steal your warmth. The fire resists briefly, the coals too low to immediately ignite the fresh fuel. You blow on them, patient but also increasingly uncomfortable in the cold. Your breath sends up small sparks, and gradually the flames begin to catch, tiny at first but growing, consuming the new wood with increasing enthusiasm. Success feels disproportionately satisfying. You've saved the household from the worst of the cold, at least for a few more hours. The fire will build, the temperature will rise slightly, and everyone will sleep more comfortably because you drag yourself out of warmth to tend it. Small heroism, maybe, but heroism nonetheless. Your father-in-law coughs in his sleep, that wet, rattling sound that worries you more each time you hear it. The cold is especially hard on him, you can tell. His body doesn't generate heat the way it used to, doesn't recover from stress the way younger bodies do. You add an extra log to the fire, deciding warmth is more important than conserving wood. If he gets seriously ill, if the cough develops into something worse, there's not much you can do. Medieval medicine for respiratory illness consists mostly of prayers, herb teas of dubious efficacy, and hoping the patient constitution is strong enough to fight off whatever's attacking them. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. You don't want to think about what happens if it doesn't work this time. The fire is burning well now, flames dancing cheerfully, heat beginning to radiate outward. You stand there longer than necessary, absorbing warmth, reluctant to return to the cold pallet before you've recovered some heat to take with you. Outside, the wind has picked up again. You can hear it testing the thatch, probing for weaknesses, the sound like waves on a shore or something breathing. The hut creaks slightly, just the normal sounds of a wooden structure responding to temperature changes and wind pressure, nothing concerning. But everything sounds more ominous in the deep night when you're cold and worried. You finally force yourself back to the pallet, moving quickly, diving under the blankets, and pressing close to your wife's warmth. She's deeply asleep, hasn't stirred through your entire fire-tending expedition. The cold you've brought back with you from your excursion slowly dissipates as the blankets trap your body heat again. Your feet remain painfully cold, but you tuck them against your wife's legs. She's wearing wool hose under her dress, and gradually they begin to warm. The fire crackles cheerfully now, doing its job, transforming fuel into heat and light in that ancient transaction that's kept humans alive through countless winters. Outside, the world is frozen and hostile. Inside, you're slowly warming again, returning to something approaching comfort. And somehow, despite the cold, despite the worry, despite everything, sleep begins to creep back over you. Just a little while longer until dawn. Just a little while longer to rest. The rhythm of seasons lives in your bones more than your mind. You don't think about it consciously, don't articulate it in words, but your body knows what month it is, what stage of the agricultural year you're inhabiting, what comes next. Right now, in February, you're in the deepest part of winter sleep. Not literal sleep, though you're sleeping more hours per night than you will in summer. The metaphorical sleep of the land, the dormant period when nothing grows and survival depends entirely on what you've stored from previous seasons. This is the hungry time. The autumn harvest feels distant now, and spring planting remains weeks away. Your food stores are depleted, but not yet dangerously low. You've got grain, You've got dried peas, you've got the animals if things get desperate. Though slaughtering livestock in winter means losing their productive capacity for the coming year. It's a calculation you hope you won't have to make. Summer nights are entirely different from this. In June or July, you'd barely sleep at all, maybe 4 or 5 hours before the early dawn woke you and the long workday began. Summer is frenetic, desperate even, trying to accomplish months of agricultural labor in the brief window when crops are growing and weather permits outdoor work. You'd be exhausted in summer, but it's a different exhaustion than winter's. Active rather than passive, driven by urgency rather than grinding through cold and darkness. Summer nights would mean you'd sleep outside sometimes, when the hut became too hot and stuffy to bear. Just spreading blankets in the small yard area, trusting that summer weather wouldn't turn dangerous overnight. Historians studying medieval peasant life note this flexibility in sleeping arrangements, the way people adapted to seasonal conditions without the modern expectation that sleep must always happen in the same place in the same way. Your children would sleep outside more readily than you, finding adventure in it. In summer, the hut would smell different too. Dry thatch baking in the sun, less smoke because you'd keep the fire lower, the scent of whatever was growing in your wife's garden drifting through the open door and window. Food would be more varied, more interesting. Fresh vegetables, herbs, occasionally something that wasn't preserved or dried or from your limited winter stores. The memory of summer eating makes winter pottage seem even more monotonous than it is. But summer also meant vulnerability. Storms could destroy crops. Disease could sweep through villages crowded together in close working proximity. Heat could kill as surely as cold if it came with drought. Every season had its dangers and its particular forms of potential catastrophe. Spring would bring hope mixed with anxiety. Would the seeds germinate? Would late frost kill new growth? Would there be enough rain, but not too much? The weeks after planting were nerve-wracking, your entire year's survival, depending on factors mostly beyond your control. Spring nights would feel transitional, still cold, but with the promise of warmth coming, still dark, but with days noticeably lengthening. You'd sleep less deeply, your body sensing the approach of the busy season, beginning to prepare for the sustained physical effort ahead. Autumn was its own particular experience. Exhaustion from harvest work, but satisfaction too if the yields were good. The desperate rush to get everything cut, threshed, and stored before weather turned. Autumn nights brought relief. The major work was done. You knew whether you'd have enough to survive winter, and you could finally rest. Medieval peasants lived so intimately with seasonal rhythms that the church calendar aligned with agricultural cycles. The holy days weren't arbitrary. They fell at moments that made sense within farming life. Christmas came during winter's deepest point, offering spiritual comfort when physical comfort was scarce. Easter coincided with spring renewal. Harvest festivals celebrated autumn's bounty. Historians debate whether this was deliberate synchronization or natural evolution, church adapting to existing peasant practices rather than dictating them. Probably both, the way most historical processes involve mutual influence rather than simple top-down imposition. Your sleep patterns would shift with daylight hours, not by choice, but by biological necessity. In summer, with 16 hours of daylight, you'd sleep perhaps 5 hours total, divided into that segmented pattern of first and second sleep, with the midnight waking period shorter because there was less night to fill. In winter, with only 8 hours of daylight, you'd sleep 10 or 11 hours, your body conserving energy during the long darkness, metabolic rate slowing to match the season's demands. Modern people sleep roughly the same amount year-round, artificial lighting and climate control disconnecting them from seasonal rhythms. But your sleep was as seasonal as everything else in your life, expanding and contracting with the light, responding to temperature, shaped by the agricultural calendar's relentless demands. Right now, in February's depths, your body is in full winter mode. Sleeping longer, moving slower, conserving energy until the season turns and the desperate activity of spring planting begins. You're like the trees outside, dormant but not dead, waiting for the signal that it's time to wake up and grow again. Your daughter will experience this differently as she grows. Her first memories will likely be seasonal. The taste of strawberries in summer, the smell of harvest, the cold of winter nights. She'll learn the year not as 12 named months, but as a cycle of planting, growing, harvesting, storing, surviving. Time itself works differently in medieval agricultural life. Not linear and abstract, but circular and concrete, measured in seasons and harvests rather than calendars and clocks. You don't think it's February 15th, 1450. You think it's deep winter, about 6 weeks until Lent begins, maybe 10 weeks until planting. The present moment, this cold night, this warm fire, this sleeping family, is part of an eternal cycle that your ancestors experienced and your descendants will experience. The particulars change, but the pattern remains. Winter is always hard. Summer is always frantic. Spring is always hopeful. Autumn is always a reckoning. And sleep adjusts accordingly, expanding and contracting with the light, serving the body's needs across the turning year. Outside, the darkness seems absolute. But dawn will come eventually, the way it always does, and the cycle will continue its slow revolution toward spring. For now, though, winter holds the world in its grip, and sleep is the appropriate response. Long, deep, restorative sleep that carries you through the darkness toward whatever comes next. The village exists just beyond your walls, but it might as well be miles away right now. Each family has retreated into their own small sphere of warmth and light, creating islands of habitation in the darkness. 20 or 30 huts scattered across this small piece of England, each one containing a similar scene. Fires burning, families sleeping, the same struggle against cold and night. You can't see them, but you know they're there. The miller's family, 3 huts down. The blacksmith and his wife and their 6 children. Old Margaret, who lives alone since her husband died. The carpenter's household with their adolescent sons, learning the trade. All of you so close geographically, but separated by darkness and cold into individual units of survival. During the day, the village is communal space. People work together in the fields. Women gather at the well to draw water and exchange information. Children run between houses playing games that have been played for centuries. The boundaries between households are permeable. You borrow tools, share news, help with tasks that require multiple people. But night changes everything. Night makes each household sovereign, responsible only for its own survival, until morning comes and community life can resume. Historians studying medieval village structure often focus on the daytime social networks, the complex web of obligations, relationships, and interdependencies that define peasant life. But they sometimes overlook this nightly separation, the way darkness temporarily dissolved the collective into component parts. You know your neighbors intimately despite this nightly isolation. You know who's industrious and who's lazy, who pays their debts and who makes excuses, whose marriage is happy and who's estranged. Village life doesn't permit privacy in the modern sense. Everyone knows everyone's business, for better and worse. The blacksmith drinks too much. Everyone knows this. Old Margaret is suspected of knowing herbcraft that edges toward the questionable, though nobody says which out loud because that's dangerous talk. The carpenter's eldest son is sweet on the baker's daughter, and their clumsy courtship provides entertainment for anyone paying attention. These human dramas play out in a space measuring perhaps a quarter mile across. Your entire social world, the complete set of people you'll interact with regularly throughout your life, probably numbers fewer than 200 individuals. Modern people might find this claustrophobic, but you've never known anything else. There's comfort in it, actually. Everyone knows everyone, which means you're never truly alone. If you're sick, neighbors will help. If your roof needs repair, people will show up. If you're hungry, someone will share what little they have. But it also means no anonymity, no escape from community judgment, no ability to reinvent yourself or leave behind mistakes. Whatever reputation you establish in childhood follows you through life. The village has been here for generations, probably centuries. The same families working the same land, living in essentially the same way their ancestors did. Change happens, but slowly, incrementally, across timescales that make it nearly invisible to individual lives. Your grandfather's hut stood roughly where yours stands now, though rebuilt several times due to structural decay. His grandfather probably lived within 100 yards of this spot. Going back further becomes unclear. Records don't exist for people like you. But it's likely your family has been tied to this particular piece of earth for longer than anyone can remember. Medieval peasants weren't serfs chained to the land, exactly, but practical considerations made movement difficult. Where would you go? Other villages needed workers, perhaps, but they'd view you as an outsider, and establishing yourself in a new community without existing relationships would be nearly impossible. So people stayed, generation after generation, building their lives in the same small area where their ancestors lived and died. Historians debate whether this stability was comforting or stifling to medieval people. Probably both. The way most aspects of medieval life involve trade-offs between security and constraint, community support, and community surveillance. Right now, in the deep night, each household is its own small kingdom. The miller isn't thinking about you, nor you about him. The blacksmith is asleep or awake in his own hut, tending his own fire, managing his own cold. Old Margaret is alone with whatever thoughts occupy a widow's midnight hours. Everyone's separate, everyone managing their own patch of darkness and light. But come morning, the village will reassemble itself. Doors will open, smoke will rise from every roof, and people will emerge into the shared space of daylight. You'll see the blacksmith heading to his forge, will exchange nods with the carpenter, might have a brief conversation with someone about weather or work or nothing in particular. The nightly isolation will dissolve as if it never existed, replaced by the dense interconnection of village life. This rhythm of separation and reunion, individual household at night and collective community during day, structures medieval peasant experience in ways that are easy to overlook. Modern people live in denser populations, but often with less actual community connection, neighbors who are strangers, anonymous urban existence. You live in a tiny population, but with complete social saturation. Everyone known, everyone connected, everyone part of a web of relationships that's been forming for longer than anyone can trace. Your daughter will grow up knowing exactly who she is in relation to everyone else in the village. She'll know her place, her family's place, the entire social structure that governs existence here. She'll marry someone from the village or possibly from the next village over, but probably not much farther. Her children will grow up in the same small world you've inhabited your entire life. Is this limiting? Absolutely. Is this secure? Also absolutely. The village isn't perfect. There are conflicts, resentments, long-standing feuds that everyone knows about but nobody can quite resolve. But it's a system that works, that's kept people alive and functioning for countless generations. Outside the village lies wilderness, danger, the unknown. Inside the village lies community, however imperfect, and that makes all the difference. Right now, in this moment, you're alone with your family in your small hut. But you're also connected invisibly to every other hut in the village, all of you doing the same thing, tending fires, fighting cold, protecting children, waiting for morning. Separate but parallel, individual but part of something larger. And somehow, in the medieval darkness, that's enough. In the darkness, you whisper a prayer. Not elaborate. You don't know elaborate prayers, lacking the education for anything beyond the basics. Just simple words that your mother taught you, that her mother taught her, passed down through generations of people seeking protection through the vulnerable hours. Lord, keep us through this night. That's essentially it. Maybe you add something about the children, about your father-in-law's health, about making it through winter. But the core is always the same, a request for safety, for survival, for seeing another dawn. Faith permeates medieval life in ways that are difficult for modern people to fully grasp. Not faith as intellectual choice or philosophical position, but faith as the fundamental framework through which you understand reality. God isn't someone you believe in. God is the explanation for why things happen, why crops grow or fail, why children live or die, why the sun rises each morning. The church teaches that everything is God's will. Suffering, prosperity, illness, health, all part of some divine plan that's beyond human understanding. This can be comforting or maddening depending on circumstances, and you felt both responses at different times. When your first child died, a daughter who lived only 3 days, the priest said it was God's will, that she was needed in heaven. Did this help? Not really, but it provided a framework for grief, a way to process incomprehensible loss without descending into complete despair. Historians argue about whether medieval people were genuinely pious or just performing piety because social pressure demanded it. The truth is probably that the distinction itself is modern, assuming a separation between authentic internal belief and external performance. Medieval people didn't necessarily make that distinction. You pray because that's what people do, and whether it's sincere in some modern psychological sense isn't really the question. You pray because the alternative, a world without God, without divine order, without any guarantee that goodness will eventually triumph, is too terrifying to contemplate. The hut contains several religious objects, minimal but significant. There's a small wooden cross hung on the wall near the door, crude but recognizable. Your wife insisted on having it, said it would protect the household. You don't know if that's theologically sound, but it makes her feel better, so the cross stays. There's also a clay medallion with an image of Saint Christopher, patron saint of travelers. Someone gave it to you years ago. You can't remember who, and it sits on the small shelf with your few other possessions. You've never traveled farther than the market town 10 miles away, but having the saint's image seems prudent anyway. During the day, religion is more structured. Sunday means church attendance, which is mandatory in ways both official and social. Missing Mass without good reason invites questions, suspicion, potential trouble. The church building itself is the only stone structure in the village, larger and more permanent than anything else, a physical reminder of institutional power. The priest is educated. He can read Latin, which to you seems like an almost magical ability. He's also the primary connection between your village and the larger world of church hierarchy, theological debate, and ecclesiastical politics that you barely understand. He tells you what to believe, how to behave, when to fast, and when to feast. Most of the time you comply, because non-compliance isn't really an option. But there's also folk religion, the older practices that exist alongside official Christianity. Your wife makes small offerings at the crossroads sometimes, bread, milk, things that might appease whatever spirits inhabit the land. The church disapproves of this, calls it superstition or worse, but people do it anyway because these practices have worked for centuries and abandoning them seems risky. Historians studying medieval religion note this syncretism, the way official Christian doctrine coexisted with much older belief systems that Christianity never fully displaced. You don't think about it as two separate religions, just as different aspects of the same general need to influence forces beyond your control. Night is when supernatural fears feel most present. During the day, with work to occupy your hands and sun to light the world, you don't worry much about spirits or demons or other invisible dangers. But at night, in the darkness, when everything is vulnerable and exposed, those old fears surface. The fire is protection against darkness, certainly, but also against whatever might lurk in darkness. Evil things fear fire and light. Everyone knows this. As long as flames burn in your hearth, your household is relatively safe from supernatural threats. Relatively being the important word. Your daughter sometimes wakes crying about night terrors, convinced something was in the room. You comfort her, tell her it was just a dream, but part of you wonders. The boundary between natural and supernatural is porous in the medieval worldview. Dreams might carry real messages. Shadows might conceal actual threats. The dead might visit the living under certain circumstances. The church has opinions about all of this, of course. Official theology distinguishes between approved supernatural elements, God, saints, angels, and forbidden ones, demons, witchcraft, pagan spirits. But in practical village life, these categories blur. People pray to saints, but also leave offerings at old sacred sites. Respect church doctrine, but also consult wise women about herbal remedies that edge toward magic. You've never witnessed a miracle or seen an angel or experienced any of the dramatic supernatural events described in church teachings. Your faith is quieter than that. Just the daily assumption that there's some order to existence, some purpose beyond mere survival, some reason to hope that goodness matters even when evidence suggests otherwise. Maybe that's enough. Your prayer finished. You lie quiet, feeling the warmth slowly returning to your body after the fire-tending expedition. Outside, the darkness continues, impersonal and immense. Inside, you're protected by walls, by fire, and by faith that tomorrow will come and life will continue. The medieval world is harsh and uncertain, but at least it makes sense within its own framework. Everything has meaning, even suffering. Nothing is random, even if the pattern is too large to perceive. And you're not alone. God watches, or so you've been taught. And whether that's literally true or just a comforting story, it helps you sleep through the dangerous hours. That's something anyway. Maybe everything, depending on how you look at it. The soft breathing around you creates its own rhythm, a gentle percussion of life. Your daughter's breath is the lightest, quick and shallow, the rapid metabolism of childhood burning even during sleep. Your wife breathes deeper, steadier, the measured pace of someone fully relaxed into rest. Your father-in-law's breathing is more labored, interrupted occasionally by that concerning cough. You can identify each person by their breathing pattern without seeing them. This intimate knowledge comes from years of sleeping in close proximity, of lying awake in darkness while others sleep, of learning to read the subtle variations that indicate whether someone is deeply asleep or just drowsing, whether they're comfortable or restless. Children are precious in ways that medieval life makes brutally clear. You've buried one child already, that daughter who lived only days. Your wife has had 2 miscarriages that you know about, possibly more that she hasn't told you about. Of the 3 children born alive to your marriage, 2 survive. These aren't unusual statistics for your time and place. Historians studying medieval childhood mortality estimate that perhaps 30 to 50% of children died before age 5. Disease, accidents, malnutrition, the simple fragility of young bodies in a world without modern medicine, all of these took their toll. Everyone in the village has lost children. The Miller's family lost 2 in 1 week to some illness that swept through several households. Old Margaret buried 4 of her 6 children before they reached adulthood. The carpenter's wife has given birth 7 times and has 3 living children to show for it. You don't dwell on these numbers, because dwelling on them would be paralyzing. Instead, you do what you can. Keep your children fed, warm, protected from obvious dangers. Beyond that, their survival is in God's hands, or fate's hands, or whatever force determines these things. Your son sleeps with the complete abandonment of a child who feels safe. He's sprawled across his pallet in a position that looks uncomfortable but apparently isn't. One arm flung over his head, blanket kicked partially off despite the cold. You can't see him in the darkness, but you know he's there, know he's fine. In the morning, he'll wake full of energy, ready to take on whatever tasks the day brings. He's learning constantly how to care for animals, how to maintain tools, how to read weather signs, how to navigate the social complexities of village life. By the time he's 12 or 13, he'll be capable of doing most adult work, though he'll lack the strength and stamina for the heaviest tasks. Medieval childhood was shorter than modern childhood in that sense. The extended adolescence of modern Western culture, the years of education and development before entering the workforce, would be incomprehensible to you. Children contribute economically from young ages because household survival requires it. But that doesn't mean childhood is entirely grim or joyless. Your son plays, invents games, gets into mischief with other village children. He's allowed to be a child even while gradually learning adult responsibilities. The transition from childhood to adulthood happens gradually rather than through any formal marker. Your daughter is different, younger, more vulnerable, and also female, which means her life trajectory will diverge from her brother's. She'll learn women's work from her mother, spinning, weaving, cooking, managing the household's domestic economy. She'll probably marry in her mid to late teens, moving to her husband's household or bringing him into yours if circumstances warrant it. You try not to think too much about her future, about the risks of childbirth that kill so many women, about the general vulnerability of female existence in medieval society. For now, she's just your small daughter, sleeping peacefully between you and your wife. Her presence a comfort and a responsibility in equal measure. Every parent in every hut across the village is experiencing some version of this same thing right now. Listening to children breathe, hoping they'll survive the night and all the nights to come, knowing that hope is sometimes insufficient but never entirely abandoning it. The generational continuity is what matters in medieval life. You're raising children who will replace you, who will work this land and live in this village and raise their own children in turn. Your significance isn't individual. It's as a link in an unbroken chain stretching backward into the unknowable past and forward into an equally unknowable future. Modern people might find this depressing, this sense of being just one replaceable unit in an eternal cycle. But there's comfort in it too. You're part of something larger than yourself, something that will continue after you're gone. Your children carry forward not just your bloodline, but your knowledge, your stories, your particular way of understanding the world. That's a kind of immortality, modest but real. Your wife shifts in her sleep, her hand finding yours under the blankets without either of you fully waking. This unconscious reaching for connection, even in sleep, feels significant somehow. Your partner's in the project of keeping these children alive, of maintaining this household, of surviving long enough to see what happens next. Medieval marriage isn't romantic in the modern sense. It's economic partnership, social arrangement, reproductive necessity. But affection grows anyway, or at least mutual respect and dependency, which might be better foundations than passionate love for weathering the difficulties of peasant life. Your father-in-law coughs again, and you tense slightly, listening to see if it develops into something worse. It doesn't, just a brief disruption. Then his breathing settles back into its labored but stable pattern. He's been part of this household for years now, ever since your wife's mother died, and he could no longer manage on his own. Taking in aging parents is expected, part of the web of intergenerational obligations that structures medieval family life. You'll expect the same from your children when your time comes. If you live that long, which is never guaranteed, but is at least possible if you avoid accidents and major illnesses and general misfortune. The children breathe on, oblivious to these adult concerns, lost in whatever dreams occupy young minds. And you listen, grateful for each breath, each sign of life continuing, each small victory against the forces that threaten children in this uncertain world. Tomorrow they'll wake, and there will be work and play and learning and all the ordinary business of childhood. But tonight, they simply sleep, protected by walls and fire and the vigilance of parents who know how fragile life is and cherish it accordingly. That's enough. More than enough. Actually, it's everything. The fire is dying again, inevitably, the way fires always do. You've been watching it from your half-awake state, observing the slow transformation from flames to coals, from bright orange light to deep red glow. The progression is hypnotic, meditative, drawing your attention even as your body sinks deeper toward complete rest. The coals pulse gently, as if breathing. Each one contains concentrated heat, the wood's energy compressed into this dense, glowing form. They'll continue radiating warmth for hours even without flames, slowly cooling as they give up their stored energy to the surrounding air. This is the fire's final gift before it requires more fuel, sustained, steady heat without the dramatic performance of active combustion. The hut's temperature is dropping noticeably now. Not dangerously, not yet, but enough that you're aware of it, even under the blankets. The cold is creeping in from the edges, reclaiming territory that the fire temporarily conquered. By morning, if you don't add more wood, the hut will be significantly colder than it is now. You should probably tend the fire again. But the thought of leaving the warmth you've cultivated under these blankets, of exposing yourself to the cold air, of standing barefoot on the frozen floor, it requires more willpower than you can currently muster. Let it burn down a little more, you think. The coals will last. Morning isn't that far away now, though you have no way of knowing exactly how far. Time is approximate at night, measured by feeling rather than any objective standard. The quality of darkness has changed slightly, though you can't see it with your eyes closed. Some subliminal shift in the atmosphere, in the sounds outside, in the way the air feels. Something tells you that the deepest part of night has passed, and the slow slide toward dawn has begun. It's not yet dawn, not even close. But it's past midnight, past that dead center of night, when time seems suspended. Now you're on the far side, the gradually brightening side, even if brightness is still hours away. Medieval people developed an acute sensitivity to these subtle shifts, learning to read the night by feel and instinct rather than by checking clocks. Your father-in-law's breathing has changed too, becoming lighter, less labored. Perhaps he's surfacing toward wakefulness himself, or perhaps he's just moved into a different stage of sleep. Either way, the concerning rattle has diminished somewhat, which brings a small measure of relief. Maybe he'll be fine. Maybe it's just winter taking its toll on an old body, and come spring he'll rally the way old people sometimes do when warmth returns and the world starts growing again. Or maybe not. You've learned not to invest too heavily in either hope or despair, because the future is unknowable and preparing emotionally for every possibility is exhausting. Better to just exist in the present moment. This warm space under blankets, this breathing family, this glowing fire that's keeping everyone alive through another winter night. Your wife is fully asleep now, deeply enough that her breathing has taken on that particular quality of complete relaxation. She's been working as hard as you have. Harder, maybe, because women's work never really stops the way men's work does. You finish plowing and you're done for the day, but your wife finishes cooking and there's still spinning to do, children to tend, animals to manage, the endless small tasks that maintain a household. She deserves this rest. Tomorrow she'll wake and immediately resume the work that never ends. But tonight, for these hours, she can simply sleep and let the world continue without her active participation. That's a gift you can give her, watching over the household, tending the fire when needed, ensuring everyone's safe so she can rest without worrying. Small gift, maybe, but meaningful in the context of shared survival. The darkness outside seems less absolute now, though again, this might just be your imagination or some trick of your adjusted senses. True dawn is still hours away, probably 3 or 4 hours, maybe more. But the night is waning, imperceptibly but definitely, moving through its cycle toward the inevitable return of light. This happens every night, you remind yourself. Every night ends. Every darkness eventually surrenders to dawn. Every cold night eventually becomes morning. The reliability of this cycle is one of the few constants in medieval life. Whatever else changes or fails or disappoints, the sun will rise. That's something worth holding on to. Your body is settling into that final deep sleep before morning, the last stretch of real rest before the day's demands begin again. Your muscles are relaxing completely, releasing the last tension held over from the day's work. The fire glows on, coals pulsing with their slow internal rhythm. Your family breathes around you, alive and safe for another night. Outside, the world continues its patient turning toward morning, indifferent to human concerns, but at least predictable in its cycles. And you drift deeper, finally, surrendering completely to sleep, trusting that the fire will last, that morning will come, that tomorrow will bring its own challenges but also its own small satisfactions. The embers glow, the darkness holds, and sleep takes you, gently but completely, into whatever dreams wait in the final hours before dawn. Everything is as it should be, which in medieval life is the best you can hope for. Safe, warm enough, together, alive. The rooster crows, distant but unmistakable, shattering the deep silence of late night. It's far too early. The bird is confused or overeager, mistaking some subtle shift in darkness for the approach of dawn. But once a rooster starts, others often follow, a cascade of premature announcements spreading across the village like wildfire. Sure enough, within moments you hear another rooster responding, then another, their calls overlapping in a chaotic pre-dawn chorus that serves no purpose except to wake people who aren't ready to be awake. You keep your eyes closed, refusing to acknowledge the possibility of morning. Your body knows it's not time yet. The cold is still too intense, the darkness too complete, the fire too low. Real morning, the kind that demands you rise and begin the day's work, is still at least an hour away, maybe two. But consciousness has been disturbed, and now you're caught in that frustrating space between sleep and waking. Not alert enough to think productively, but not drowsy enough to easily drift back in a deep sleep. Just suspended in an uncomfortable awareness of being awake when you should be asleep. Around you, the household remains undisturbed. Your wife hasn't stirred. She's developed the ability to sleep through almost anything, a skill born of years of interrupted sleep when children were infants. Your daughter is motionless, still lost in whatever dreams occupy her. Even your son, usually the first awake, shows no signs of consciousness. Only you are awake, listening to roosters crow their false alarms into the darkness. The goats are stirring now too, disturbed by the noise. You hear them moving in their pen, hooves shuffling on straw, the mother making small questioning sounds as if asking whether it's really time to start the day. They're as confused as you are by the premature wake-up call. This happens sometimes. Roosters aren't perfect timekeepers, despite their reputation. They respond to light levels, but also to disturbances, to their own internal rhythms, to factors you don't understand and can't predict. Most mornings they get it right, crowing at a reasonable hour that corresponds to actual dawn. But occasionally you get these false starts, these middle-of-the-night announcements that serve only to frustrate everyone within earshot. You lie still, deliberately slowing your breathing, trying to trick your body back towards sleep. It works partially. Your consciousness becomes less focused, thoughts beginning to drift in that associative way that precedes sleep. You're aware of the hut around you, but less urgently so, aware of your body, but more distantly. The roosters eventually fall silent, having exhausted their initial enthusiasm. Maybe they've realized their mistake, or maybe they've simply run out of things to crow about. Either way, silence reclaims the pre-dawn darkness, blessed and complete. Your mind wanders through half-formed thoughts, dreamlike but not quite dreams. You think about tomorrow's work, the wood that needs splitting, the repairs the goat pen requires, the dozen other small tasks that accumulate during winter and demand attention. You think about spring, still weeks away but beginning to feel almost imaginable, the prospect of warmth and growth and relief from winter's grinding difficulty. You think about your father-in-law, about his health, about the probability that he won't survive many more winters. But these thoughts don't carry the weight they would during full wakefulness. They drift through your mind without catching, acknowledged but not dwelled upon, present but not demanding. This is the strange mercy of pre-dawn semi-consciousness. You can think about difficult things without being overwhelmed by them. The fire has died down to almost nothing now, just the faintest glow from the deepest coals. The temperature in the hut has dropped noticeably, though you're still warm enough under the blankets that it's not urgent. Soon you'll need to rise and rebuild the fire for real morning. But not yet. Not quite yet. There's still time to rest, to hover in this space between sleep and waking, to exist without responsibility or worry or the pressing demands of survival. Medieval people didn't have words for this experience, didn't conceptualize it as something separate from just resting or sleeping. But you know it anyway, in your body if not your conscious mind. This particular state of being that's neither sleep nor wakefulness, but something in between, something that feels almost like meditation, though you'd never use that word. Outside, the village is mostly silent now. The roosters have given up, and no other sounds disturb the late-night stillness. Everyone is asleep in their own huts, or at least trying to be, all of you waiting together for the real dawn that will eventually, inevitably arrive. You feel yourself sliding deeper again, consciousness dimming, the half-thoughts becoming more fragmentary and dreamlike. Your body relaxes more completely into the pallet, the straw yielding beneath your weight, supporting without demanding. Your breathing synchronizes with your wife's, an unconscious matching that happens often when you sleep close together. The darkness seems almost friendly now rather than threatening. Familiar, comfortable, a known quantity that's protecting you as much as constraining you. And somewhere in this darkness, sleep finds you again. Not dramatically, not with any clear transition, just a gradual dimming of awareness until you're more asleep than awake, more absent than present. The roosters crowed too early, but it doesn't matter anymore. Morning will come when it comes, and until then, there's just this warmth, darkness, the breathing of your family, and the slow, patient turning of night toward dawn. Everything else can wait. Everything else will wait. For now, there's only rest, and that's exactly what you need. True dawn comes quietly, without announcement, a gradual lightening that you sense before you see. Your eyes are still closed, but something has changed in the quality of darkness. It's less absolute now, less impenetrable, as if the night itself is thinning, becoming translucent rather than opaque. You don't open your eyes yet. There's no urgency, no immediate demand pulling you from rest. Just this gentle awareness that the long night is ending, that another day is beginning its slow arrival, that the cycle is turning once again from darkness toward light. The cold is more noticeable now in the pre-dawn stillness. Your nose is cold where it extends beyond the blankets. The air you're breathing feels sharp, crystalline, carrying the particular chill of winter mornings before the sun has any chance to warm the world. But you're warm enough under the layers, and your wife's presence beside you radiates additional heat, and your daughter between you is like a small furnace, her child body burning calories and generating warmth even in sleep. This is enough. This moment, this warmth, this family safe and together through another night. This is what matters. The fire will need tending soon, properly this time, not just adding a log or two, but rebuilding it from coals into actual flames that can warm the hut and cook the morning meal. But not yet. For a few more minutes, you can simply lie here, suspended between night and day, between sleep and waking, between the demands of yesterday and the demands of tomorrow. Outside, the real roosters are beginning to crow now. The ones with better timing, the ones who actually recognize dawn when it arrives. Their calls are different from the midnight false alarms, more confident, more purposeful. These are the songs that mark genuine transition, that announce to the village that night is over and the world is waking. You hear other sounds too, subtle but distinct. A door opening somewhere in the village, probably the baker, who always starts early to have bread ready by mid-morning. The distant sound of someone coughing, the noise carrying clearly through the cold, still air. A dog barking, investigating something in the growing light. The village is stirring, each household beginning its own private transition from sleep to wakefulness. You open your eyes finally, though there's not much to see yet. The hut is still mostly dark, just the faintest gray light beginning to seep through the gaps around the window shutter. The fire is barely alive, just a few coals still glowing weakly in the hearth, providing almost no illumination. But you can make out shapes now, the darker forms of your family members, the goat pen at the far end, the various objects that populate your small domestic space. Everything familiar, everything in its place. Another night successfully navigated. Your father-in-law is already awake, you realize. His breathing pattern has changed, and now you hear him moving slightly on his pallet, the careful movements of an old man whose joints are stiff from cold and night. He'll be the first up, probably, needing to relieve himself, and unwilling to lie still once consciousness returns. Getting old looks uncomfortable, you think, but it's better than the alternative. Your son is stirring too, making small sounds that suggest he's surfacing toward wakefulness, though not quite there yet. He'll resist for a few more minutes, then suddenly be completely awake and ready to start the day with that boundless energy children somehow possess even after cold nights and insufficient sleep. Only your wife and daughter remain deeply asleep, and you're content to let them rest as long as possible. The work will begin soon enough for all of you, but especially for your wife, whose labor is perhaps the most relentless because it's never quite finished, never fully done. You ease yourself out from under the blankets, careful not to disturb your daughter. The cold hits immediately, aggressive and sharp, making you gasp slightly. Your feet find the floor, frozen as expected, and you move quickly toward the hearth, toward the work that will transform this cold, dark space back into something livable. The coals are barely alive, but they're enough. You blow on them gently, patient and practiced, and gradually they brighten from dull red to brighter orange. You add small pieces of kindling, watching carefully as they catch, then slightly larger pieces, building the fire methodically from nearly nothing back into actual flames. It takes several minutes, but you're in no rush. The flames grow, slowly but surely, casting increasing light throughout the hut. Shadows retreat into corners. The temperature begins to rise, incrementally but noticeably. You add larger pieces of wood now, and the fire responds enthusiastically, crackling and popping as it consumes fresh fuel. Your father-in-law is up now, moving stiffly toward the door, heading outside for morning necessities. The cold air that rushes in when he opens the door is shocking, but it dissipates quickly as he closes it behind him. Your son sits up, rubbing his eyes, already looking around to see what needs doing. Good boy, you think, learning without being told that mornings require work, that everyone contributes, that the household functions through collective effort. Your wife is stirring now too, though she keeps her eyes closed, stealing a few more moments of rest before fully committing to wakefulness. Your daughter sleeps on, oblivious, her face peaceful in the growing firelight. Outside, the light is increasing steadily, that gray pre-dawn glow that will eventually brighten into actual day. You can hear the village coming alive, more doors opening, voices calling to one another, the general sounds of a community beginning its daily rhythms. Another night has ended. Another day is beginning. The pattern repeats, reliable as seasons, constant as the fire that you've just brought back to life from dying coals. There's comfort in this repetition, in knowing what comes next, in understanding your place within the larger cycle of days and seasons and generations. You're just one person, one family, one small hut in one small village in a vast medieval world. But right here, right now, with fire warming the space and your family safe around you, you have everything that matters. The work will begin soon, the endless tasks that fill peasant life from dawn until darkness returns. But for these final moments of transition, there's just this: warmth gradually replacing cold, light gradually replacing darkness, your family slowly waking, preparing to face whatever this new day brings. The fire burns steadily now, strong and reliable, doing what fires have always done, keeping the darkness at bay, creating light and warmth in cold spaces, making human life possible in an often hostile world. You stand there a moment longer, warming your hands over the flames, feeling the heat soak into your cold skin. Outside, the sun hasn't quite broken the horizon yet, but it's coming. Dawn is arriving, unstoppable and patient, bringing with it another chance, another day, another opportunity to survive, and perhaps even find small moments of joy in the surviving. Your wife opens her eyes finally, meeting yours across the growing firelight. No words are necessary. She knows what you know, that you've made it through another night, that the family is safe, that whatever challenges the day brings, you'll face them together. Your daughter yawns, still half asleep, burrowing deeper under the blankets for just a few more minutes of warmth before the day truly demands her attention. The fire crackles cheerfully, fully alive now, transforming the hut from a cold, dark space into something that feels like home. And somewhere outside, just beyond the horizon, the sun continues its slow climb toward morning, bringing light back to the world the way it has for millions of mornings and will for millions more. Night is ending. Day is beginning. And you're here to witness it, here to participate in it, here to continue the ancient human project of surviving and protecting those you love. That's everything, really. That's enough. More than enough. It's the whole world contained in one small hut, warmed by one small fire, sustained by one family's determination to keep going, keep trying, keep hoping that tomorrow might be at least as good as today. The flames dance upward, reaching toward the smoke hole, toward the lightning sky beyond. Your family begins to move, slowly transitioning from sleep to waking, from rest to readiness. Another day in medieval England. Another day of work and worry and small satisfactions. Another day of life, which is all anyone can ask for and more than enough to be grateful for. The fire burns. The sun rises. And you're here, alive and warm and together, ready to face whatever comes next. The night has passed, slowly and completely, the way winter nights do when every hour feels stretched and heavy with cold. You've traveled through darkness together, through the long watches of the medieval night, and now morning is arriving to claim you back. But before you return to the demands of daylight, before the work begins again, take a moment to feel this transition, this gentle passage from night into day, from rest into activity, from the vulnerable hours into the productive ones. You're safe. Your family is safe. The fire that nearly died has been brought back to life, the way it's been brought back to life countless mornings before this one, the way it will be brought back to life countless mornings after. There's something profound in that continuity, in the knowledge that humans have been doing this exact thing, tending fires, protecting children, surviving winters for longer than anyone can remember. You're part of that ancient story, that endless chain of people who refused to give up, who kept going even when it was hard, who found meaning in small things like warmth and safety and the breathing of sleeping children. Outside your medieval hut, in whatever time and place you're actually listening from, your own night is passing too. Maybe it's late where you are, and you're ready for sleep. Maybe it's already tomorrow, and you're just beginning your day. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, you're connected to that medieval peasant family through something fundamental. The need for rest, for safety, for warmth in cold spaces, for connection with others who make survival possible. These needs don't change. The technology changes, the circumstances change, but the basic human experience of seeking comfort and protection through the dark hours, that remains constant across centuries. So let yourself drift now, if you're ready to sleep. Let the fire continue burning in that medieval hut without your attention. Let the family wake and begin their day without you watching. Your work here is done. You've spent the night by the fire. You've kept vigil through the dark hours. And now it's time to release your hold on that world and sink into your own rest. The fire will keep burning. The family will keep surviving. The seasons will keep turning. Winter eventually surrendering to spring. Darkness always eventually yielding to light. These patterns are reliable, constant, older than memory, and more enduring than any individual life. You can trust them to continue without you. You can let go now, knowing that the story goes on, that life persists, that morning always comes even after the longest, darkest, coldest night. So close your eyes, if they're not already closed. Feel the warmth of your own space, your own blankets, your own safe place wherever you are. Feel your breathing, slow and steady, the same breathing that humans have been doing since the beginning of time. Feel yourself settling deeper into rest, letting go of the day's thoughts and worries, allowing sleep to take you gently into whatever dreams are waiting. The medieval hut fades from your awareness, becoming memory rather than experience, story rather than presence. But its lessons remain: the value of warmth, The importance of family, the satisfaction of surviving another difficult day, the hope that tomorrow might bring something better. Carry those lessons with you into sleep. Let them comfort you, the way that fire comforted a family 600 years ago, the way warmth and safety and connection have always comforted humans facing darkness and uncertainty. You're safe. You're warm enough. You're exactly where you need to be. And sleep is coming now, patient and gentle, ready to take you into that same darkness that medieval people knew, that same unconsciousness that's been human experience forever. Let it come. Don't resist. Just drift, slowly and completely, into the deep rest that your body and mind need. The fire burns low now, just coals glowing softly in the darkness. The family sleeps on, peaceful and safe, making it through another night. And you drift with them, finally, completely, into the deep, tranquil peace that comes when you stop trying and simply allow yourself to rest. Everything is as it should be. Everything is well. Everything can wait until tomorrow. For now, there's only this warmth, darkness, breathing, and the gentle, unstoppable pull of sleep. Let go. Drift down. Rest deeply. Sweet dreams.